Welcome to the Microsoft Security Insights Podcast with your hosts, Franklin Grimberg and Edward Walton, where we discuss Microsoft 365 security and Azure security news and products.
Microsoft Security Insights Podcast, August 4th, 2021. How you doing, Frank?
Great. How are you this evening?
I am super good. I'm turning on Focus Assist because that literally tears me up whenever I'm doing something and somebody wants to talk to me about things. So,
how's the new job doing?
New job is awesome.
I should say new role.
Yeah. Ed keeps telling me that he's going to reach out and ask me about it. Literally nobody does. The funniest thing. So I've been in this role for almost 2 weeks now. Almost done with my first project, which is actually pretty cool. I'll be able to talk about it a little later. But my manager is on holiday for the first 2 weeks. So I'm trying to figure out, some things to do. I'm actually getting my nose into some things, but a couple projects. But yeah, everything's kind of been slow. But really, this role is a lot different than any I've been in. So it's really just trying to figure out what I'm going to do anyway.
They don't know what you're going to do. Do you know what you're supposed to do?
I do. So previous roles in the services org, your conversations are one-to-one. Your conversations are between you and your customer. Move on to the next customer. It's between you and that customer. In the advocate role, it's more one-to-many. So we need to develop content, whether it's learning or documentation or presentations or whatever it happens to be, so that it's a one-to-many conversation, so we can reach more of our customers and more potential customers in one fell swoop. For example, the thing that I'm working on this week, it's literally just a little snippet, 15-minute snippet of Azure Sentinel goodness, but it's going to be translated in several different languages and delivered in those languages from those people in those different countries all over the globe. So again, that kind of one to many versus just kind of the one-to-one communication and conversation scenario. So it's interesting.
So did we talk about your new certification that you received last week? I can't remember.
My new certification?
Yeah, I thought you got it.
The Attack IQ stuff?
Yeah, tell me about that.
Oh, those are actually pretty neat. Somebody, I don't know how I came upon that, to tell you the truth. Always, you always love the Attack IQ stuff. You always love the MITRE ATT&CK stuff. So that, MITRE ATT&CK interests me. So I saw it.
Well, if you're doing Sentinel, you have to be interested in it. You have no choice.
Yeah, well, yeah, I guess so. I guess so. Or any SIEM, really. It doesn't matter if it's Sentinel or not. Obviously, I use the best SIEM out there, but no.
Defender for endpoint, that is?
Yeah.
No, just kidding. Just kidding.
Azure Sentinel, it's connects everything. But no, it's kind of interesting. I did the first couple modules. I thought this is actually pretty decent, pretty nice. The training is good. It's really in depth. I've only finished 3 of the courses so far. Got my little awards in each one, but I think there's literally like 10 or 12 or something. So when I get a little bit of time, I want to go back and finish them all.
So we do have a question for you. What made you change roles?
So I am, how do you put this? I'm an interesting person. I can't sit still for very long. I get very antsy. I like to do lots of things. And in fact, in my career, I've done lots of things and have lots of experiences and lots of knowledge in different roles that I've had at different companies and such. And joining Microsoft, I started out in the services org, absolutely loved it. But again, once I figure something out, I'm more apt to try to go figure something else out. I hope that doesn't sound bad to any prospective managers I have in the future, but yeah. But no, I like to be challenged constantly. And I saw this as a challenge. The other piece of this, I like to do things that I can put my stamp on. It's not really an ego thing. Again, it's just I like to do things that have impact. This is a brand new group at Microsoft. It's in line with everything that we're doing from a security perspective. There's never been a security advocate group. I'm absolutely the very first employee, and I don't have any other teammates at the moment. So yeah, starting from scratch. But getting this role was actually pretty interesting. I interviewed for this role back in March. Anyone that's gone through the Microsoft interview process knows that it's a, shall we say, frustrating scenario sometimes. I interviewed for this in March. Everything went dark after that. Had 3 interviews. They were absolutely amazing. I thought, there's no way that I can't be the person they select for this. And it went dark. The system that we have to check in within Microsoft even said that I was no longer being considered for the role. So I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to go and take this security CSA thing, because this is, again, it's a brand new role. I'm going to be challenged and all this stuff. What was it about? I guess it's about a month ago now. I was in the security CSA role, getting comfortable, figuring things out, doing well, developing some programs that, are kind of still in place for POCs and things like that. The hiring manager reached out about a month ago and said, hey, you should expect an offer letter here this week sometime. I'm like, what? So, yeah.
It's funny. The only time Microsoft has ever considered me to become an employee out of all the years that I've been doing Microsoft stuff was, I forget what year it was. It was a long, long time ago. So I'm starting the interview process. And at the same time, you have to understand, I own the domain name visualstudio.com back then.
Great.
So one day I wasn't really using it anymore because I was very annoyed with it, because people would call me and say, where's my Visual Studio? And I'm like, I'm just really annoyed with getting these calls. So I really wasn't using it anymore. And people have to understand, this was the time when the whole domain squatter situation was going on. Everybody was getting sued and all this other stuff. And I had the domain for like 7 years or something like that, right? So people have to realize that if you ask for a lot of money for the domain, you're going to get sued by the company, right? that wanted it, right?
Yeah.
So I get this call one day from a Microsoft contract attorney, I'm sure. It says, hey, you need to give us that name back, but because you have not updated your contact information at Network Solutions, we're going to bring up fraud charges on you. This is how the lawyer introduced herself to me. I'm like,
oh my goodness, wow. I'm so sorry.
So I went back to this hiring manager, or whoever this hiring person was from Microsoft, said, so would it hurt my chances if Microsoft's threatening to have me brought up on fraud charges? So yeah, it didn't go any further after that for some reason. But what I did, just to be a jerk to Microsoft, because I got to tell you, I would, if they said, here's a free copy of Visual Studio, I would have been happy to hand it. It was no big deal to me because I was annoyed having the domain name, but I had it for 7 years at $30 a year, $40 a year, or whatever. So I'm like, what am I going to do with it, right?
Yeah.
I went to this one attorney who said, you have actually had this domain name longer than they've had the trademark on it. He says, listen, if you give me $1 million, I'm sure we can win in court. I'm like, it's not really worth it. So I went back to the Microsoft lawyer and I said, hey, listen, I've had this domain in Visual InterDev. I don't know if you remember that product and all that stuff for all these years. I paid $30 a year for this for the past 7 years. I'm like, you guys cut me a check for 7 times, 30 times the number of domains that you want back from me. Just reimburse me for my cost. That's all that I'm asking, right? I mean, there's no, at that point in time, what are they going to do? Say, oh, he's asking for millions of dollars or whatever. But I knew that it would be a hassle for them to go through the approval process to write me the check. So they did send me the check, for, I forget how much it was, nothing for however much that was. And then Microsoft never talked to me again. So,
you're on a list.
I'm definitely on a list. But it drives me nuts every single time I have to go to my.visualstudio.com. It drives me nuts doing that. So, all right, we have a very. So I watched a video this week, and I was completely wrong and my assumption about what Microsoft was doing. Okay. So when I saw this, I said, this is great. I said, but this is also an opportunity to talk about the building blocks behind what they're doing from the technology standpoint, not the manual process that they're going to go through. So let me figure out how to share my screen here. Oh yeah, that's right. And we are going to talk about this, and I'll tell you what I did wrong in my thinking.
What are you starting out with? Oh, okay.
So let's talk about this. So why don't you introduce what it is and talk about the purpose of it, then I'll tell you how my assumptions were wrong.
So before we went live, you called it ASIM. And I just want to start out by saying I totally, absolutely appreciate you calling it that. Over the past couple of days, I've heard it called a multitude of things, right? Literally what it is, it's Azure Sentinel information model. And we're trying to develop some standards around it. Over the past couple of days, I've heard people say stuff like ASIM, which I hope that doesn't catch on because it's horrible. I've heard that a few times. I'm like, oh my goodness, please don't. And this was internally during some recent roadmap calls. So anyway, the Azure Security Information Model, this is really top of mind and has been top of mind for the past 6 months to a year with the product group, particularly Ofer, who delivered this webinar that you watched, right? So he's the principal product group manager for Azure Sentinel. Really good guy, really intelligent. And this is something that's, again, been top of mind for the product group and particularly for him, because he does come to Microsoft from other places, other vendors, other SIEM experience. And this is one of those pain points. And I've said this all along, said it a number of times. We are trying with Azure Sentinel to develop this platform that is just literally better than the other platforms, right? The other SIEMs and things like this. There's a lot of gaps in the current state of SIEMs, whether they're on premises or in the cloud or whatever. There are some kind of severe gaps, particularly around data ingestion and data normalization and data types and things like this. Really good example. If anyone has ever worked with DNS and the DNS schema structure, every device that does DNS seems to have its own structure, its own schema. It'll stick IP address in this column and we stick IP address in this column. We try to make it a little bit more normal so that when you're querying, looking for this data or trying to analyze it, it's really easy to find where that IP address is. DNS, switches, things like that. They'll put ports and different, they just literally don't care sometimes what they call a port, right? And it really is important. If you're looking for something, if you're a security person and you're looking for, the port number, the traffic for that port, it's absolutely critical to be able to figure out exactly what to call it, to look for it. So that's what ASIM, not ASIM, but ASIM is intended to do here. There's actually three kind of goals, and I had you asked about this yesterday or day before, and there's our recent semester roadmap discussion or this week, and I had to go back and look and see what all we could talk about. Fortunately, Ofer literally covered everything, so we can absolutely talk about all of it. ASIM is supposed to do three things for us, right? Number one, normalize that data, normalize what that schema looks like, normalize where that data, what pockets that data exists in. And even before it gets into Azure Sentinel, you can determine, right, how that data is going to be transformed, how it's going to be normalized, how it's going to be filtered, even how that data is going to be enriched once it gets into this log analytics workspace for Azure Sentinel, so that not only can customers ingest into custom tables like they can do today, and then hopefully try to tie those IP address columns to the other IP address columns, but if we're able to normalize this stuff so that it is uniform, then we can actually ingest whatever data, whatever log file it is, into the normal Azure Sentinel tables. So you don't even have to create custom tables at that point because it's all been normalized. The idea is to do this before it gets there. Like I said, we're trying to create this platform. One of those gaps is we want it to be so easy for our customers to connect literally all their data. If you have data and you want to connect it and you want to look through it and analyze it for security purposes, you should be able to do that. There should not be hoops and jumps and all kinds of stuff to get it into Azure Sentinel so it can be analyzed. And that's a big piece of what this is intended to do. Ofer announced today, in fact, there was a blog post released today. There's some new, I forget which one it was.
I think it was file or something like that.
The file operations, right. So there's a blog post Ofer, and there's also a GitHub component out there, some new functions, and what's being provided, at least today, in this form for the normalization and things is you can deploy these new KQL functions to your Azure Sentinel environment. And as you start to ingest things like file operations, it's going to automatically know about that and normalize it and pull it into the log analytics workspace. So it's much easier to query against and also apply it to all the other data that exists in that log analytics workspace. There was one other thing, and you may even ask a question about this, which would help me remind me. But
so what I found interesting was here's where I went wrong on this. And watching the video was very informative. And so I assumed this was an effort to make what was going into Sentinel look more like the structures and data that's the normalization that is done with inside Defender for Endpoint with the device structures. Okay, and the way that they did the normalization here.
Yeah,
that was my assumption, and so I was wrong. It's much more than that. I think the thing that really stuck out to me is that focusing in on creating parsers based upon activities versus just the data structures coming in. So when you watch his video, he's talking about when you say, tell me about all the logons, then based upon all the different data sources, it will understand how to provide you the logon events.
That reminds me what I was going to say.
Okay,
Yes.
go ahead.
Yes. And we have our fusion technology, right?
Right.
So yeah.
Well, what is the fusion technology for people that don't know?
Well, Fusion is kind of an AI component that looks through all these different data sources, and based on what we know about, it will tie those disparate sources together, right? So instead of getting alerts, you'll get a story versus about what happened in that chain of events. User clicks on an email, opens an email, user clicks on a link, they go to a website turns out to be potentially nefarious. There's a mass download in the background user has no inclination about, and then a process is started and malware is installed, right? That's an entire story. Fusion's able to do that because it's able to tie those different data sources together in that way. When we get to the point with this ASIM stuff, we'll be able to do that to more, hopefully all, but more data sources. So we can tie all of that stuff together again for that entire story. It makes it so much easier for an analyst to figure out what's going on, because ultimately that's our goal here. We need to determine what happened, who did it, and how to respond now, but also how to respond in the future. And we need to do that quickly. Right now, most SIEMs, we've put forth some effort within Azure Sentinel to help from an efficiency standpoint, but even so, it takes too long, right? So there's a lot that still needs to be done to make that even a quicker scenario.
Let me go here.
AI or ML, is there a difference?
I can't remember where I wrote this. Understand the data connector. I can't find it now, but so I'll just use Notepad for what we're talking about, and you can correct me on these
Notepad's
table
the best.
names. Star from MDE security event. Common. What is this? This is a common event format, but it's called common event security, common event log. What is that called again?
Which one? Common security
common
log?
security log. And then sysmon, not sysmon, syslog. I always actually get the two. A mistake. So if you take a look at these tables, I want to call out these two first tables here.
Okay.
And common security log, which is CEF, which is the common event format, and then you have syslog. So one of the things that I'm noticing with a lot of the new connectors that are coming into Sentinel, if you go to data connectors and you select on any one of these, on the bottom left-hand corner, they're going to tell you which table it's going to. So
yeah,
what is the difference between a common event format and which, if you see it going to common security log, you know that's common event format. And if you see syslog down here, you'll see that it's actually going to syslog. So what's the difference between the common event format, the common security log versus syslog?
Literally just the way that the data is organized in a schema.
Right.
Just,
so
yeah.
So basically syslog is basically, other than the header information, the data payload itself is unstructured. Right. You actually have to parse this out yourself to figure out what to work with it, where the common event format is following through. Now I'm actually starting to see a lot more of the, this is going to syslog. Yeah. I just had one up here.
Well, and see, that's an important thing to kind of point out and note. These data connectors, these out-of-the-box data connectors that we have within Azure Sentinel, so there's a number of pieces of collateral that come with each data connector, right? So we have the analytics rules, we have the workbooks, we have sample queries, but what you don't see are the parsers, right? So there is a parser that's built into this data connector that understands the schema of that source.
Right.
And
but
then yeah,
that's parsing it out into the actual structure that's going in.
Yeah.
So this one from Qualys is actually going to a CL, which is a custom log. Yeah. For you to work with. And if you want to see custom logs in your environment other than through, or create them, you can create them over with inside the log analytics there. So,
or through
so we have syslog, where this is basically truly unstructured data that you have to then parse. Now, when I take a look at something, when somebody does a presentation, I always try to look at the learning building blocks for what's going on behind the scenes. So that's why I'm going through all of this. Okay. Events is where when you set up sysmon, it will go here. Security event is from your security connector for Windows security, Windows machines that you install the agent. And of course, MDE is from Defender for endpoint. So basically you have all of this data coming in here, and you'd want to say, hey, give me all the logins, and the promise is that you could do that, and these structures would know how to send back the data in a consistent format with even the values are standardized across all of these different tables coming back to you.
Yeah, and and another piece of that is, and I don't think, maybe if we're talking about it, I'm not sure, but it's also going to be able to take that, not just the Fusion stuff, but utilize it as part of UEBA, right?
Yep. Right. So basically, they're creating functions or parsers which are standardizing this. So let's take a look at some KQL stuff so we can understand what's going on after it gets into log analytics, how it's actually surfacing the data back out, the parsers that are being created. So let's understand the parser technology and how you would actually use it. Okay. So when you create it, so explain what functions are within inside KQL, Rod.
A function is essentially a KQL query that you have saved as a function and given it what's the name? Yeah, I'm getting old. Given an alias, and you use from henceforth, you just use the alias instead of the entire query, and the function just literally runs that entire query.
Right. So you have so in this case, this example out here, you have office activity as the table. You have a very long KQL statement, which is normalizing the data for what you're looking for. And then inside your own code, you can then just call, in this case, mailbox forward. Okay. And it's going about and doing all of this work. So you simply save off when you're writing the KQL query, you save as a function, you put in the alias name, and then you can go ahead and call it directly. So if you go out to the GitHub for Sentinel and then go to community, so if you go to community and then you can jump out to the GitHub here, you can go out and see parsers that have already been written. And there's been many parsers out here for a long time, more specifically Sysmon, right?
Yep.
And so you're starting to see the ASM
oh no.
parsers actually get dropped in here for you then to go ahead and work with. So this just happens to be the parser for Sysmon registry. And then they're talking about, I guess, different products down here. So if we take a look at the generic, here's the actual statements out here that you'll actually be importing. So let's go take a look here.
Yeah, you can import them
query.
one by one if you want, but
Right.
there's also that deploy button.
So basically, they're taking the KQL functions, importing them, and just the industry term for this is called a parser. So that's why you hear the term parsers. But really what you're doing is you're converting the data so it's into more of a standard format to work with. So there's been parsers out here for a long
time. I
time.
don't know how many people have worked with syslog and stuff. Well, primarily syslog. You import a log file and it's literally, there's one raw data column or one raw data row, and that's literally all of your data. And it's split out by whatever it happens to be, whether it's semicolon, comma, question mark, exclamation, who knows?
So in the SC200 training part 6, connect logs to Sentinel. If you go down and you take a look at connect syslog data sources to Azure Sentinel, you actually have a section that explains setting up the parser for syslog and how to go about calling that. So you do actually have this out there and learn and setting this up. It gives you an example of how to do that. Okay. Now, what I want to talk about is the SC200. So it's funny because in this video, they talk about Sysmon and pulling out specific events within inside or activities from Sysmon coming in. So I got a good laugh out of that. So then I said, okay, let's take a look at the SC200 labs. So out here on GitHub, you have lab AK07, lab 1, exercise 4, which are the attacks. So in the SC200 material, you first have a section that's talking about understanding the attacks that you're going to go ahead and take place with. And there's a list out here in a GitHub of other attacks for you to go ahead and use. But I chose 3 different attacks to do that are very simple because the attack doesn't really matter. What matters is the process of building your detections. The first one is a persistence with a registry key add statement, which we've talked about before, Rod. Yep. And then we have a user add and elevate the privilege to the local group administrators to work with. And then the third one is the DNS C2 scenario, which basically is utilized on the threat hunting side to check for C2. So most importantly is saying, hey, listen, you need to understand the detection model when you perform the attacks in the labs, you go out and you attack a Windows configured, Windows host configured with Defender for Endpoint. You do the attack 1 and attack 3. Attack 1 is the registry key add. And then you're going to set up the C2 calls. And then attack 2 or task 2, you actually attack a Windows host configured with sysmon. So you're getting that information over. And then we go from there. So this is the one with the registry key add, and then also the pushing up the user's the privilege escalation there. So in the detections, what's important here is that we walk you through the process of modeling an attack so you can understand your data, okay? So in this task, you will create detection for attack. So detection from sysmon. So what we do is we walk you through the process of searching the table. Oh, look, I've actually put in, I did the attack, so I know the artifacts to look for, right? And so in here, we've decided to we've seen that it's actually in the event table, which we know it's coming from our sysmon logging. And in here, we take you actually out to, so you guys can perform all this without, on your own. It actually takes you out to take a look in the Azure Sentinel GitHub under parsers and take a look at the sysmon parsers and the one to pull from here. And this has basically for all of the different events going on. So what's interesting is that maybe in the future, so then we go through and build out the entire detection that's going to take place. And you can see it creates the function here, save as function. So event registry set value, and then you can go ahead and utilize that in your detection. So what's interesting is that in the future, this would actually be changed to say utilize the ASIM get registry add event or activity to see what's going on, versus you going out and writing your own parsers about this.
Yeah.
Am I right?
That's yeah, correct. Yeah, that's a good way to do it. I mean, I think for all intents and purposes, we try hard, but we literally give customers 100 different ways to do something.
Well, I mean, I think that this was interesting to go through in the SC200 class, but basically, in the future, you're not going to have to go out and do that work. You're going to be able to use this the schema here and just pull it and be on your way.
Well, and I think you showed in the GitHub repository there, maybe the one that was released today, the other parsers or all of these will be deployable through an ARM template.
Right.
Versus,
so basically, I did in the class here what they're doing now automatically for you for going out, creating the parser, doing this. So,
so I absolutely appreciate this, because this is some good knowledge, because I don't think we're ever going to make some turnkey system where it's just click, 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 and you're off to the races.
Well, Fusion's supposed to do all the work. Fusion's supposed to do all the work for us anyways.
Well, true, but you still need your architects, you still need your engineers. Being an analyst is great, but you still need those other folks. So this is good knowledge still, I think, to learn. So
what's interesting here is that if you do the same attack for Defender, then you're actually going and pulling from the device registry events table.
Yeah.
So it's a completely different table, and doing the same sort of thing, but you're actually now creating, creating it based the query, the KQL, based on device registry events versus the events table. So in theory, we should be able to say, give me all of the registry events for add, and it will look across all the different data sources because of that that's available in the system? Or will we have to union all these together?
Repeat that. I'm sorry.
I know you.
My dad's, I don't know.
So here's the same example of going after the same scenario. But I'm going now to the device registry events table, right? So the question becomes this, is that since this will all now be standardized for going after registry events, will I have to union that in, or is there going to be a way that it says, okay, we're going to search across the different device registry, we're going to search device registry events, we're going to be searching events and any other thing that you have plugged in. How is that managed going across multiple different log files?
So
for the same activity.
Right. So I don't know for sure what this will ultimately look like, but if that data exists in that log analytics workspace, it should be able to, and as long as we understand that data and are able to correlate it with data that exists somewhere else, we should be able to fuse all that together.
Okay.
I mean, that's the ultimate goal here, right? Our customers should not have to worry about the data. Leave that to ops or someone else, architect. Our analysts should just simply be able to investigate quickly, figure out if something is innocuous or not, and then either move on or remediate, right?
And then my next question that I take people through here is the fact that when I do the local, when I do the add of the user and then I escalate the user, the interesting thing is that the only SID that I have, I don't actually have the username, I only have their security identifier for what's been put in. So then to provide more information to the analyst, I go out and I run additional queries to try to match up to find that username. Okay.
Right.
So this query here is an attempt to make that happen. It's not going to happen for everyone, just based upon what data is available, right?
Right.
Because it's actually saying, okay, I know that SID did not exist before this add, but now can I find data after the add that has the SID so then I can actually put in the target username so then they have the account name.
So that you can match everything up, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering how the fuzzy logic here to pull this sort of stuff in is going to be handled in this.
In the system itself, or automatically handled in the system itself. Yeah.
Right. I mean, am I then at this point in time saying, calling a function, a parser, and passing in the user ID or the security identifier that I'm looking for, and then the time window to try to find where it's at, then to bring it together? Because I could not actually bring this together without going through this process. Right. So I'm interested in seeing how they're going to handle this and putting in together not only the activities that you're trying to find log on, log off events, but also the data that you build out to help the security analysts from the entity's standpoint.
Right. Well, and that's key, right? Because when you think about it, think about the four major questions that you always have to ask for investigations. Does it exist? Where does it exist? Who did it? And then how do we remediate? You have to have all of those different entities, right? And a lot of times, some of those aren't considered entities, but I think they are. But you need at least those top three to figure out exactly what was going on.
So it'd be interesting to see if they build out parsers that are not only on activity, but identity, and I mean entity population to help with that scenario. I don't know if they've gone that far with it or not yet.
Yeah, and I don't believe I know, or if I could talk to that yet anyway, just based on what I know.
So how much time do you see people writing detections that spend providing the additional information to the analyst? How important do you see people doing that enough, or where do you see
Writing
that
their
today?
writing their own detections. We do have some customers who are, deep into learning KQL, and they understand what data sources they have. But I would say that's a smaller percentage. There are more customers that use Azure Sentinel today that use what's either out of the box or what's provided on the GitHub repository for the most part. I don't think the majority of them are writing their own detections.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
It's and I don't think it's an Azure Sentinel thing. I don't think it's a security thing. I think it's a cloud thing. Got a lot of customers who are in the midst of cloud migrations or are new to the cloud, and they're spinning up VMs. They're migrating their on-premises workloads. They're making them look just like they used to look on-prem. And this whole KQL thing is something that's kind of new, or someone's introduced it to them. They're like, why do I need to know a new query language, right?
Well, how are they doing their hunting then, or are they not even hunting?
So working with customers over the past couple of years, one of the things that's been a little, to me, as a security person, who is absolutely a hunter, it's just my personality. The number of customers that have stopped hunting because their tool has become bloated and unmanageable and unusable was significant. The hope is, particularly with Azure Sentinel, that they'll be able to incorporate that again into their processes. There's still a lot of customers that do it, but like I said, there's some customers that either have stopped doing it, have thought, we'll start that back up here in a little while, or some of them just literally have stopped doing it completely and never want to do it again.
Wow.
Yeah, absolutely. So
were they more focused on hunting on the endpoints or in the Azure
endpoints
related?
On-prem. I'm talking about on-prem folks that have used on-prem SIEMs and security tools for the last 10 years, right? Use those tools, become comfortable with them, identified the gaps, and instead of trying to fill those gaps, they've just, it's too much to work around, we'll just stop doing it.
I'm really surprised by that. Interesting. All right, do you have any more thoughts on this?
Well, it'll be interesting to see how this works out. Like I said, set through a roadmap session yesterday for this semester, and this is one of the big investments. So I think
a lot of manual labor, a lot of work here.
Yeah, I think by the end of this year, I think we're going to see a significant improvements here, and a lot of new features, some new parsers, and all kinds of stuff that's going to be rolled out pretty quickly, periodically, and consistently, I think. So we'll see. It's interesting to me because Azure Sentinel is built on the same DevOps pipeline that all of our Azure services are. There's literally a new feature and function that comes out, whether it's some major feature that's announced weekly or it's some nuance that's released almost to the minute. What Azure Sentinel was in October of last year and what it is today, it's absolutely completely different. And the investments and the intelligence behind the development for what's coming within the next year is just absolutely amazing. As different as Azure Sentinel is today than it was in October when Gartner got hold of it, a year from now, it's going to be just as different. And I don't mean different, you're going to have to learn a lot of new things. It's just different in the way that it just functions better.
Interesting. All right. Do we have any questions in chat here?
Let's see. Something about cool kids. Tater Chip Jones also kind of reciprocated what I said about the KQL stuff. Just moved from AWS shop to Azure shop and trying to get up to speed with all this. So there's some gaps even for the KQL stuff. One of the things I believe it's important to note. So we're talking about KQL for security purposes. KQL is the query language of choice for anything data centric within Azure. If you work within Azure for any purpose, even beyond security, you will at some point in your life, in your career, have to learn KQL. You don't have to be a master, but it's important to understand exactly, if you look at a KQL query, to look at it and understand what its intent is. What will the results be for that? Intune uses the same thing. Microsoft Endpoint Manager. You pull in SQL logs into Sentinel, you'll use KQL to look for security events, right?
So one of the things, so in Learn, you have this SC400 Part 2 create queries using Azure Sentinel, using KQL. When I wrote this, I actually went out to the GitHub repo here.
Yeah.
Not only did I look at the parsers, I looked at the detections that were out here. Oh, you have this in here in detections too. I didn't see that. And basically what I did is I looked at, so this is a great learning resource for you to learn KQL. And so what I did is I went out here and said, okay, let me look at all of these different queries here and grab all the syntax that I'm seeing out here. Okay. So it was a much smaller list back then when I did that. But yeah, so these, so here's SolarWinds detection. You can go ahead and see the query out here. So the other way to get up to speed on this is to go out and take a look at the detections that are on in the community on GitHub and start looking at what are the syntax that they're using in and out. And also it teaches you about the data itself, where things are stored if you're not actually searching through that yourself. Didn't mean to do that. So this is a great place to learn KQL. So here's the different IOCs here. But like I said, I did an analysis of this to actually build out this KQL learning path here for Sentinel. So KQL is a much larger language than what's listed here in this learning path, but it was the standard stuff that I saw in all of those detections out there. So it should carry you and get you started there in learning that.
The other thing I posted in the chat is that demo environment that you're using, that's actually available for everyone. aka.ms/.
Right. Yeah. So when you go out and you do this on Learn, they will actually have you go out there somewhere accessing the log analytics demo environment. So just as long as you have an Azure ID, which you can get for free, you can go ahead and log into that environment and run most of these samples.
Yeah, and there's another place too. I forget what's the name of that one. Oh, it's all about weather patterns and cities, and you know what I'm talking about?
Not tonight.
Yeah. So I'm tech reviewing a couple Azure Sentinel books right now. One of them has an entire chapter on KQL, and they use the other demo environment. They could be listening. The author, that was one of my comments about the book, was if you're going to have a KQL chapter in the middle of an Azure Sentinel book, why not use Azure Sentinel environment or Azure Sentinel queries versus going to the one with weather patterns and stuff? So anyway, they're using that one as the example in the book.
I gotta tell you, I just feel really bad for anybody writing a book right now.
Yeah, I feel bad for anybody writing a book, documentation, a blog post, anything, because it changes all the time.
Oh yeah, yeah. This is going to be a painful little area here on the SC200. Getting those two reconciled now with a new unified portal. So
let me ask this question, because I don't know, it seems logical to me, but maybe no one's thought of it. I'm sure everybody has. If I've thought of it, I'm sure everybody else has thought of it. But between the time that you finish these modules and you schedule your exam, will the exam match up exactly what you went through, or do you have to?
Oh no, definitely not. So
within a certain period of time.
No, so I think these are updated like every single 6 months. Like I said, this unified portal came out 1 week after this stuff was posted out here on Learn. And so the best thing is to download the exam skills outline right here and realize that yes, you need to match up what's going on here, okay? And remember that the exams have new questions added, removed, whatever, every single few months. So, if there is a new feature with Inside Sentinel and has been 1 month, there's possibility it could be on the exam, even though it's not inside the Learn material that's out here. It's not updating fast enough. I mean, there's a lot of things about writing this content where one of the things that you'll see is that, that actually has an interactive guide or a walkthrough, but you'll see very little screenshots here. The rules are only use screenshots if you have to, because of how much the portals change. And they don't want to manage all of that going back. So you'll see, opening up the product and also walking through what's going on at the time. What's going on in the Learn module is very important for working with that. So you'll see all of this fun stuff out there. But the skills measured, basically, I would take each one of these, go to the docs, go to your portal, and find out everything that's going on here about each one of these bullet points. And then anything new that you see out there, make note of it.
Yeah, that to me just seems, wow.
Well, no, I mean, the bottom line is that, I had a debate with somebody that was teaching the SC 400 course because they were beating up on Microsoft for not having the most current information in the Learn material or the Microsoft official training material, and the labs were just 2 weeks out of date. Okay. And it was not up to the minute there. Well, the bottom line is that customers don't want to wait for the Learn material to be updated to get the feature that they want, right? I mean, that's just not going to be fair to you guys trying to push out improvements and new features, right? Yeah. So there is a process that goes through for learning material going out, and there's a process that goes through for the exam questions, and that's the thing. And those three are all on different life cycles that are taking place. And that's just the way it is. I mean, if you know the products, you're going to be able to pass the exam.
Yeah, I took the exam before I went through the modules.
Yeah, I mean, so when you look at the percentage breakout here, with it being so heavy on Sentinel, which was 40 to 45%, I think
that's funny, because my exam was not made primarily Sentinel; it was primarily everything else.
I would actually, this Defender 25 to 35% or 25 to 30%, I would do Defender for endpoint in its own section, and then break it out from there.
Yeah, I was really hoping there would be more Azure Sentinel because I flew through it anyway, but I thought, nah, I'm just gonna. Well, I didn't know what to expect. I didn't know if I'd pass or not. So
I think the hardest one that I'm not allowed to write questions on this exam, but um, the Azure Defender side, I think would be very hard to write questions against. Just because of the type of, because Azure Defender does so much for you, right? Is kind of hook it up and go. That I think that it's harder to write the questions against out of all three to go with. And then going through the Defender side, the M365 Defender side, it just covers so many different areas that was going to be tough. So yeah, I mean, overall, I mean, I've been watching the feedback on the learn content, on the exam itself, and I have to say it's all been very, very positive. And so I'm really excited with how well this has been received. Obviously, it's driving me nuts the fact that I already know that the content's out of date. My recommendation is if somebody's going to take instructor-led training, that they can have an instructor that understands how to deal with the fact that the environment changes. I mean, I went to an SC 400 course, I sat in on it, and I just watched half the time the instructor was blasting Microsoft for not having up-to-date content.
Oh, so when I was delivering workshops, previous role, when I was delivering workshops weekly, I would literally spend the weekend before updating all the content for everything that was released that past week, because it would just, you can't imagine going into a customer situation and start trying to walk them through something. They're like, well, that's not there. I'm like, what? Oh, they moved it again. So
yeah, but I think a lot of people now, if you're not dealing with the fact that things are moving that fast now, I mean, that's just the way it is. And my thing is, hey, customer, do you want new features and things being updated instead of waiting 3 years? Yes, then this is what we get to deal with. So that's a good
well,
thing.
and from a security standpoint, I'd say it's even more critical to be updated more consistently, because we're, even with our products, our security products, we are updating these to make sure that we have coverage for all the newness, right? Security is a moving target. It never stands still.
I mean, being able to update watch lists is important.
Yeah. I have some other stuff I can share with you later on, but yeah, we got some.
The product's moving great. Like I said last week, I'm like, I told them on the training content development, I'm like, Notepad versus Word from a functionality standpoint.
I still prefer Notepad though. Somebody made fun of me for that the other day.
But I use Notepad quite a bit, but if you take a look at the functionality difference, where that's going.
Yeah.
But all right, Rod, thank you very much once again.
I did put that thing in the chat, by the way. KQL Data Explorer is the name of the other demo site.
Right. So yeah, I know this one.
It has weather patterns. It also has COVID-19 stuff in there now.
Right. So I do know about this one, but I decided when I wrote that other content, I wanted to keep it security specific for what I was seeing out there in the GitHub for the detections. Anyways, so all right, sir. Until next week.
All right.